They say forgetting someone is easy, it just takes time. But remembering them, truly remembering them, that takes heart. She didn't want revenge. She wanted them to feel what silence sounds like. To understand that birthdays are not about candles or cakes, they're about connection. And when they opened her gift, they didn't just find memories. They found the weight of everything they'd taken for granted. Love doesn't disappear when forgotten, it simply waits, quietly, patiently, for someone to remember. And when they finally did, it was too late to say happy birthday. Night fell softly over the house, wrapping it in shadows and silence. The woman sat by the living room lamp, its golden glow flickering across the walls. On her lap rested a heavy, dust-covered photo album, the kind bound in fading leather, with cracked corners and worn pages that smelled faintly of time. As she flipped it open, the sound of paper turning was the only thing breaking the stillness. There they were, her children, smiling, laughing, eyes full of innocence. A birthday cake sat between them in one photo, its candles glowing bright. She could almost hear their voices again, "Make a wish, Mom," echoing softly in her ears. Her smile trembled. "Do you still remember me?" she whispered to the photographs. But the faces in the pictures only stared back, silent, unchanging, eternal reminders of love that had long gone quiet. And as a tear slid down her cheek, it landed on one image, one that would soon remind her what it meant to be remembered. The laughter that faded. The air grew heavy as the clock chimed softly in the distance. She closed her eyes, letting the faint echo of old laughter fill her mind, laughter that once danced through this same room. Birthdays used to mean something. The smell of candles, the clinking of dishes, her son's awkward attempts to sing off-key. She could still feel her daughter's small arms wrapping around her neck, whispering, "You're the best mom in the world." But time had a cruel way of erasing those sounds. Now the only music in the room was the ticking clock and the faint hum of loneliness. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "How quickly love forgets," she murmured. And in that moment, she realized something chilling. The house wasn't quiet because no one cared, it was quiet because the past was louder than the present. It was whispering to her, telling her that forgetting comes with a price. The decision in the dark. The lamp flickered once, then twice, before finally dimming. In that soft darkness, she sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the album before her. Her heart felt heavy, but beneath the sadness, a strange calm began to form, like a shadow rising from the quiet. She reached for her pen and a small notebook on the side table. Slowly, she began to write, each word deliberate, every stroke of ink cutting deep into the page. No anger. No begging. Just truth. "They forgot today," she wrote, "but I won't let them forget me." She closed the notebook, her lips curling into a faint, unreadable smile. Somewhere in the silence, an idea was born, not out of revenge, but out of something colder, clearer. And as she blew out the lamp, her voice whispered softly through the dark. "Let's see if they remember, when I remind them." The next morning came with a pale, gray light filtering through the curtains. The woman's phone sat on the table, cold, still, untouched. No messages. No calls. She scrolled slowly, hoping for one missed text, a forgotten voicemail, anything. But her screen was blank, glowing like an accusation. Her throat tightened. She thought maybe they'd surprise her later, maybe they were busy. But deep down, she already knew. Birthdays weren't forgotten accidentally, they were chosen to be ignored. Her hand shook as she set the phone down. "Not even a message," she whispered, voice cracking in the silence. Then, the corner of her mouth twitched, a hint of something between sorrow and irony. "They'll remember when it's too late," she said softly, almost like a promise to herself. The reflection. She walked past the hallway mirror and paused. The woman staring back looked tired, too tired for her age, too forgotten for someone who once gave everything. The mirror's edge caught the soft glint of her wedding ring, old and dull now. "I gave them everything," she muttered, fingers brushing against the glass. "Every meal, every memory, every chance." The reflection didn't answer, but something about it felt different, like it was watching her, not reflecting her. Her eyes hardened. That's when it hit her, love without gratitude was nothing more than habit. And habits could be broken. A slow, knowing smile crossed her face. Fine, she whispered to her reflection. If they've moved on, so will I. But her tone carried a cold edge, a promise wrapped in grace. The box. In the corner of her closet sat a small wooden box. She hadn't opened it in years, not since her husband passed. Dust covered it like a thin layer of memory. When she lifted the lid, the faint smell of lavender and paper filled the air. Inside were old letters, a few photographs, and a tiny gold locket. She picked up one letter, her late husband's handwriting curling beautifully across the page. Don't ever let them forget who you are. Her hand trembled, and a tear rolled down her cheek, not of sadness, but realization. She wiped it away, her expression changing from fragile to firm. I won't, she whispered. Not anymore. That evening, she sat by the fire, its warmth flickering across her face. A storm was building outside, wind pressing against the windows like restless ghosts. Her eyes followed the flames as they danced and curled, lighting her thoughts one by one. She began writing letters, one for each family member. Each word was careful, elegant, and heavy with meaning. There was no anger in them. Only truth, cold and sharp as glass. Her pen scratched against the paper, steady, deliberate, final. Each letter ended the same way. You may have forgotten my birthday, but I haven't forgotten you. The storm outside roared louder, almost as if it was listening. The delivery. Morning came drenched in rain. She stepped outside in her dark blue coat, holding a small package in her hands. It was wrapped neatly, tied with a white ribbon, delicate, almost innocent. She left one at each doorstep, careful and silent, her figure moving like a shadow through the misty streets. The neighborhood dogs barked faintly in the distance, but no one saw her. Each delivery felt like closing a chapter, quiet, calm, but deliberate. By the time she returned home, her hands were trembling, her heart oddly steady. She stood by her window, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. Now, she whispered, let's see who remembers first. The wait. She brewed herself tea and sat in her favorite chair, facing the clock. Every tick felt louder than the last. Hours passed. The rain stopped. The silence grew. Then, a vibration. Her phone buzzed once, twice. Messages began to flood in. Mom? What did you send? Is this a joke? Her lips curved into a quiet smile. Ah, she murmured. So they do remember. But she didn't reply. She only sipped her tea, listening to the faint echoes of panic that were just beginning. Her daughter called first. Mom, what's in the box? Why would you send that? Her tone was trembling, confused, maybe even afraid. The woman's voice was calm. Something you needed to see, she said. Her daughter's breath hitched. That picture, you and Dad, how did you? The line went silent. The woman closed her eyes, picturing her daughter's face, the guilt flooding in. Sometimes, she said softly, we remember love only when it looks back at us. The line went dead. And she smiled faintly, knowing it had begun. The brother's anger. Her son arrived next, furious, his car screeching to a stop outside. He stormed in without knocking. What was that, Mom? Why would you send something like that? She looked up from her chair, serene as ever. Because you forgot, she replied simply. Forgot what? He shouted. My birthday, she said. The room went silent. His anger softened into something else, shame. He opened his mouth, but no words came. She looked at him, calm and almost kind. I didn't want presents, she said quietly. Just presents. He looked away, and for the first time, he couldn't meet her eyes. The silence after. The house grew still again. Her son had left, slamming the door behind him. Only the faint ticking of the old wall clock filled the air. She walked to the window, watching the sun dip low, painting the sky in orange and gray. She could feel the shift, the guilt, the unease, the realization spreading through her family like slow fire. And yet, there was no satisfaction in her smile, only calm acceptance. The wind rustled through the trees outside, whispering faintly through the cracks in the window frame. She whispered back, "They'll never forget again." And deep inside, she knew this was only halfway through her lesson. It was late evening when she heard a knock at the door. Soft at first, then firmer. When she opened it, her daughter stood there, rain-soaked, eyes red, clutching the box tightly to her chest. "Can I come in?" she asked. The woman nodded, wordless, and stepped aside. They sat together by the fire, silence stretching between them. Finally, her daughter whispered, "Why did you send those letters?" The woman looked into the flames. "Because you forgot to look back." The words hung there, heavy and unanswerable. The conversation. They talked, quietly at first, then with trembling voices. Her daughter confessed between tears, "We didn't mean to forget. Life just got busy." The woman nodded, eyes distant. "I know. But love shouldn't be convenient." The younger woman covered her face, sobbing softly. "I'm sorry, Mom." The elder reached out, her hand trembling but gentle. "Sorry doesn't change time," she said softly, "but it can stop it from repeating." Her daughter nodded, eyes filled with regret. And for the first time that night, they both cried, not from anger, but recognition. The storm outside softened, as if listening in silence. The candlelight. Later, when her daughter left, the house felt warm again, faintly alive. The woman lit a single candle on the table, the same one from her last birthday. Its flame flickered softly, reflecting in her eyes. She whispered to herself, "It only takes one light to remind the dark who it belongs to." The candle burned brighter for a moment, then steadied. She closed her eyes and let out a slow breath. But before she could rest, her phone buzzed again, a message from her son. "Mom, can I come over tomorrow?" Her lips curved. "Yes," she murmured. "Let's finish what we started." The morning sun crept slowly through the lace curtains, painting soft patterns across the old wooden floor. The clock on the wall ticked lazily, each second echoing louder than usual in the silence of the house. She sat at the breakfast table, a cup of tea in her trembling hands, steam curling upward like fading memories. The phone rested nearby, screen dark, still, waiting, just like her. Every ring from past years echoed faintly in her mind, the laughter, the happy birthday, Mom. But today, there was only the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking. She smiled faintly, whispering, "Maybe they're just busy," but her voice cracked in the middle. Outside, the world was bright and alive, yet inside, time seemed to stand still. And as the clock struck 9, the emptiness of the house seemed to answer her silence. The afternoon drift. By noon, the house felt colder, though the sunlight still poured through every window. She dusted the picture frames, stopping at each one like it was a checkpoint of her life. Her children's smiles stared back at her, forever frozen in a time when they needed her. "Remember this day," she murmured, touching a photo of her son's 10th birthday, frosting still on his nose. But when she turned toward her phone again, it remained lifeless. No texts. No calls. Nothing. Her breath grew shallow as she sat back down, her tea now cold, her hands clasped tight. She felt foolish for waiting, yet something inside her refused to give up hope. Maybe, she thought, they're planning a surprise. But as a cloud passed over the sun, the room dimmed, and she couldn't help but feel that the only surprise was how silence could hurt this much. The candle that never burned. Evening arrived quietly, cloaked in golden twilight. She set a single plate at the table, an old habit she couldn't let go of. A small slice of chocolate cake sat beside it, one candle waiting to be lit. Her hand shook slightly as she struck the match, but halfway through, she stopped. "What's the point?" she whispered. The match burned down to her fingers, forcing her to drop it into the sink. She sat there, in the dim orange glow of the setting sun, staring at that single candle like it held the answer to everything she'd lost. Outside, the streetlights flickered to life, but inside her heart, something quietly went dark. And as she leaned back in her chair, a thought crept into her mind, sharp and cold. If they could forget me once, maybe I should remind them who I am. The road stretched out under gray skies as they drove toward her old house. The trees swayed gently in the wind, their leaves whispering secrets as the car passed. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with every mile. No one spoke. Even the radio stayed off, as if sound itself was unwelcome on this journey. When they finally turned onto the narrow gravel road leading to the house, the air seemed heavier. The windows were dark, curtains drawn, and for the first time, he wondered, what if it's already too late? The empty house. They stepped out of the car and approached the front door. The key fit perfectly, clicking softly as it turned. The air inside was cool and still, too still. Dust danced in the faint light leaking through the curtains. "Mom," he called out. No answer. Each step echoed, hollow and slow, across the wooden floor. On the table by the window sat another candle, unlit. And beside it, a note with just 3 words, "Did you forget?" The room upstairs. They followed the sound of faint music, the same melody from the heart-shaped music box. Upstairs, the door to the attic stood slightly open. The tune played softly, winding down with each turn. He pushed the door open, calling again, "Mom?" The attic was filled with light from a single window. And there, on a small chair near the window, sat the woman, perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. The music stopped. And in that silence, her son whispered, trembling, "Mom, what did you do?" The family gathered in the dimly lit living room, shadows stretching long across the walls. They carried flowers and small gifts, their hands trembling with guilt. Her son's voice cracked, "Mom, we're sorry. We forgot your birthday." The woman didn't move. She simply looked at them, calm, eyes steady. Her silence was heavier than any words. Her daughter-in-law whispered, almost under her breath, "We didn't mean to." But the woman only smiled faintly, as if she had been waiting for this moment, waiting for them to feel the weight of what they had lost. And in that quiet, the room felt colder, yet alive with something they hadn't expected, a lesson they would never forget. The reveal. She gestured toward the wooden box sitting on the table, sunlight catching its edges. "Open it," she said softly. Hands shaking, they lifted the lid and peered inside. Photos, letters, a music box, simple things, yet each one carried a memory, a truth, a reminder of love they had taken for granted. Her voice was calm but firm. "This is what it feels like to be forgotten. To wait. To hope and be ignored." The daughter gasped, realizing that the gift was not a punishment but a reflection of their own neglect. The room fell silent, each heart pounding with a mix of guilt and awe. And as they looked at her, they finally understood. Some lessons come wrapped not in words, but in presence and absence. The realization. For a long moment, no one spoke. The ticking clock seemed louder than ever, echoing through the still house. Finally, her son whispered, voice trembling, "We didn't deserve this, and yet you gave it anyway." She nodded slightly, eyes softening. "I didn't give it to punish you. I gave it so you'd remember, because remembering is all that matters now." They looked around, taking in the room, the box, the letters, the candle, each detail now vivid with meaning. The silence hung heavy, but it was no longer cold. It carried weight, but also clarity. And somewhere deep inside, they realized, this birthday would be remembered forever. The house seemed different the next morning, lighter, though still quiet. Her family gathered around the table, carefully placing the wooden box in the center. No one touched it yet. Instead, they simply sat, reflecting. Her son's hand brushed the photograph gently, almost reverently. I never knew it felt like this," he admitted, voice soft. Her daughter-in-law nodded, tears forming at the edges of her eyes. For the first time, they weren't rushing, weren't distracted, they were present. And presence, the woman thought, was a gift more powerful than any candle or cake. Small steps. She smiled faintly as they began to talk, really talk. They shared stories, laughed at old memories, and admitted mistakes long buried. The tension that had filled the house now loosened, replaced with quiet warmth. The candle from the box was lit for the first time, flickering softly, shadows dancing across the walls. Even the old music box played again, its haunting melody now comforting rather than eerie. They began to understand the value of attention, of remembering, of honoring the people who loved them. And somewhere in the back of her mind, the woman felt a calm satisfaction. For a moment, everything was right again, fragile, but real. A promise. Her son looked at her, eyes glistening. "We'll never forget again," he whispered. She nodded, her smile soft and quiet. "Yes," she said, "but it's not just about birthdays. Remember me, every day, in small ways." They all agreed, a silent vow passing between them. The box remained on the table, unopened now, a symbol of patience, wisdom, and the quiet power of memory. Outside, the wind rustled gently through the trees, carrying a sense of closure and hope. And in that moment, the woman realized that forgiveness and teaching could coexist, powerful, quiet, and lasting. Months later, the family gathered again, this time with purpose. The wooden box sat in the center of the table, untouched, a reminder of that one unforgettable day. Her birthday came again, and this time no one forgot. Candles were lit, laughter filled the room, and every person was fully present. They took turns telling stories, reminiscing, and appreciating her in ways they hadn't before. The woman watched silently, tears of quiet joy running down her cheeks. She felt the satisfaction of a lesson learned without anger, without malice, only understanding. And as the sunlight streamed through the window, she realized the circle was complete. The legacy. Her grandchildren played nearby, unaware of the lesson that had unfolded last year. Yet even they sensed it, the weight of family, the importance of remembering. The wooden box, once a vessel of warning, now symbolized continuity, memory, and love. Her children approached her, embracing her with gratitude that words could not contain. For the first time in years, the house felt alive in the way it once had, full of laughter, warmth, and connection. The gift that was meant to teach had become a legacy. And she understood, some gifts, once given, continue to teach long after the moment passes. It was the power of patience, of silence, and of memory. Peaceful reflection. That night, the house was quiet again, but differently. She sat by the window, watching the stars emerge, one by one. The world felt calm, and her heart lighter than it had in years. Her family slept peacefully, finally understanding the value of presence, love, and remembrance. The wooden box rested on the table, closed but never forgotten. And as she drifted to sleep, a soft smile touched her lips, for she knew that this birthday, and the lesson it carried, would echo forever. Some things are remembered not for the day itself, but for the way they change us. And she, quietly, had changed them all. They say time heals everything. But no one talks about what happens when time forgets you. When the voices that once sang you happy birthday become strangers in your own life. When the silence on that day is louder than a scream. I didn't cry that night. I just sat there, one candle, one empty table, and a memory of laughter that wasn't coming back. But I've learned something over the years. Sometimes, when people forget your worth, it's not your job to remind them. It's your turn to teach them. So, I sent them something, a little thank you for forgetting me. And when they opened it, they finally remembered. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the Old Folks channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel.